Fevers. Those moments when the temperature spikes and suddenly you just feel awful. And I got to say, as a parent, nothing's scarier than seeing your kid burning up, you
Yeah.
know? But what if I told you that reaching for the fever reducer every single time might not always be the best move?
Oh, that's a really interesting point.
Yeah, it's kind of counterintuitive, right? In this deep dive, we're going to unpack some of the common misconceptions around fevers and hopefully equip you with the knowledge to handle them confidently. So, ready to separate fact from fiction when it comes to fevers?
I am, and I think some of our listeners might be pretty surprised by what we discover along the way. It turns out, fevers aren't necessarily the enemy we often think they are. They're actually a pretty powerful tool our bodies use to defend themselves.
Now, that's intriguing. I've always just kind of assumed, like, a fever equals something's wrong. Got to fix it ASAP. So how does this whole fever as a defense thing work exactly? I'm really curious to hear more about that.
Well, it's pretty fascinating, actually. So when your body senses an invader, like a virus or bacteria, it sets off a chain reaction, a bunch of responses to fight it off, and one of those is raising your body temperature. And this higher temperature, it basically creates an environment that those harmful bugs don't like so much. It makes it tougher for them to multiply and spread.
So it's like we're turning up the heat to make those invaders uncomfortable, huh?
Exactly. But it goes beyond just discomfort for them. A fever also, supercharges your immune system. Your white blood cells, which are basically the special forces in your body trained to fight off those invaders, well, they increase in number and become way more active. And on top of that, your body ramps up the production of antibodies. They're like targeted missiles that latch onto those invaders and neutralize them.
Wow, I had absolutely no idea a fever was doing all that. It's like this whole coordinated defense strategy happening inside us, huh? But, if fevers are so helpful, why do we always try to bring them down? It seems almost counterproductive now.
I get it. It's totally understandable. We associate fevers with feeling terrible, right? The chills, the aches, the fatigue. And of course, we want to feel better, and we especially want our kids to feel better. But here's the thing. By being super aggressive in treating every little fever, we might actually be messing with those natural defenses and maybe even making the illness last longer.
Okay, so maybe reaching for the Tylenol every time the thermometer goes up a degree or two isn't the best strategy then. So how do we know when to treat a fever and when to let it do its thing? I'm guessing it's not just about looking at the number on the thermometer, right?
You're right. It's not just about the number. It's about taking everything into account, the person's age, their medical history, and probably most importantly, how they're feeling overall. For example, if you've got an adult with a fever under 102 degrees Fahrenheit and they're still able to go about their day, eating, sleeping relatively comfortably, they might not need any medication at all.
So it's really more about comfort than just the temperature reading.
Yeah, exactly. It's about listening to your body and using medication more to manage discomfort rather than aiming for a specific number on the thermometer.
That makes a lot of sense. But of course, there are situations where you absolutely need to call the doctor, right?
Yeah.
Like, I imagine any fever in a newborn is cause for concern.
Absolutely. Any fever in a baby under 3 months old, definitely call the doctor right away, no question. And with older kids, if the fever is very high or it doesn't come down with medication or you're seeing other concerning symptoms, like lethargy, confusion, or trouble breathing, get medical advice immediately.
Wow, this is already changing how I think about fevers. So we've talked about when to let a fever do its thing and when to call for help. But what about those times when treatment is needed? What's the best approach to manage that discomfort and help the body heal?
Well, first and foremost, hydration is key. Absolutely essential. Fevers lead to fluid loss because we're sweating more, so replenishing those fluids is really important. Water is always a great choice, and for kids, you might want to think about electrolyte drinks to help replace those lost minerals.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm guessing creating a comfortable environment is important too.
Yeah,
I remember my mom always making sure I wasn't too bundled up when I had a fever.
you're right. That's a good point. Dressing lightly, avoiding those heavy blankets, it helps the body regulate its temperature more effectively. It's not about trapping the heat in, it's about helping the body cool down naturally.
That makes sense. So what about medication? Are there times when it's necessary? And if so, are there any specific things to keep in mind?
Yes, medication can definitely be helpful for managing discomfort, but it's important to be smart about it. Always, always follow the recommended dosage instructions. And another really important thing to remember is to never, ever give aspirin to children or teenagers who have viral illnesses. There's a risk of something called Reyes syndrome, which can cause swelling in the liver and brain. It's extremely rare, but it can be very serious, so avoiding aspirin in those cases is crucial.
Good to know. So besides medication, hydration, and that comfortable environment, are there any other strategies for easing the discomfort of a fever? What about those lukewarm baths I remember from when I was a kid?
Those can be helpful, yeah. Sponging with lukewarm water can definitely help bring down a very high fever. But, and this is important, never use cold water or alcohol for sponging. That can actually make them shiver, and believe it or not, shivering actually raises body temperature.
Okay, that's definitely something I'll keep in mind. So we've covered a lot here, understanding how fevers work, when to treat them, and how to manage the discomfort. But before we move on, could you maybe give us a quick recap of the key takeaways so far?
Absolutely. Here are a few important things to remember about fevers. First, a fever is a natural defense mechanism. It helps your body fight off infection. Second, it's not always necessary to treat a fever, especially in adults with mild fevers who are otherwise feeling okay. If you do choose to treat a fever, focus on comfort and hydration. And remember, never give aspirin to children or teenagers with viral illnesses. And lastly, trust your gut. If something feels off or you're not sure whether to call the doctor, it's always better to be safe and get medical advice.
That's a fantastic summary. This is seriously making me rethink my whole approach to fevers. It's like we've been conditioned to be afraid of them instead of seeing them as a sign that our bodies are trying to protect us, you know?
That's a really insightful observation. And it actually leads me to wonder, if we can learn to trust our body's wisdom when it comes to something like a fever, are there other times when that urge to fix things might actually be preventing our bodies from doing what they do best, which is heal and recover naturally?
That's a fascinating question and one I'm definitely going to think more about.
Yeah, it's a pretty thought-provoking idea, right? I mean, we live in a world where we're so used to instant gratification, a quick fix for every little discomfort.
Right, like there's got to be a pill for that, right?
Exactly. But what if, in that search for immediate relief, we're actually overlooking our body's incredible ability to, heal itself?
Hmm. It's like we've lost touch with those, natural rhythms, those signals our bodies send us to tell us what they need.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. Our bodies are so resilient, these complex systems constantly working to maintain balance, but we've become so accustomed to jumping in, intervening at the first sign of anything out of the ordinary, we might actually be disrupting those natural processes. Think about it just like a fever is the body's way of fighting off infection. Other symptoms often have a purpose, too.
So are you saying that sometimes the best medicine might be just observing, supporting our body's innate wisdom?
In many cases, yeah, absolutely. Of course, there are times when medical intervention is crucial, absolutely necessary. But it's about approaching each symptom with curiosity instead of fear. Asking ourselves, what is my body trying to do here?
That's a huge shift in perspective for sure. So are there specific examples, times when we might be too quick to intervene to try and fix something that might actually be beneficial in the long run? I know we talked a little about coughs earlier.
Yeah, coughs are a perfect example. We often see them as annoying, a nuisance, something to get rid of with cough syrup or pills. But coughing is actually a really important reflex. It's your body's way of clearing out irritants and mucus from the airways. It's trying to help.
Oh, okay. So by reaching for that cough suppressant, we might actually be messing with that natural cleansing process.
Exactly. By suppressing that cough, you're basically preventing your body from doing what it needs to do to heal. Now, look, I'm not saying you should never take cough medicine, but it's crucial to understand that a cough often serves a purpose.
That's a great point. What about something like diarrhea? I always figured that was just like your body trying to get rid of something bad, a bug or a toxin or something.
Yeah, you're right. Diarrhea can definitely be a way for the body to flush out harmful stuff. But it's also important to remember that the gut is home to trillions of bacteria, good and bad, and they play a super important role in digestion and immunity. When we get diarrhea, we often end up losing a lot of those good bacteria, along with the bad.
Oh, wow. So while we're getting rid of the bad stuff, we're also getting rid of the good bacteria that are essential for our gut health.
Exactly. And that's why after you've had a bout of diarrhea, it's super important to focus on replenishing the gut with those good bacteria. Probiotic-rich foods or even supplements can be really helpful for that.
That's fascinating. It's like we're so focused on getting rid of symptoms that we sometimes completely forget about supporting the body's natural recovery process.
It's not just physical symptoms either. Think about our emotional responses too. We often try to just numb ourselves or avoid those difficult emotions, but A lot of times those emotions are trying to tell us something important. They could be signaling a need for change, a need to work through a tough experience, or maybe just a need to acknowledge and validate what we're feeling.
So instead of trying to push those emotions down, we should be like leaning into them, trying to figure out what they're trying to communicate to us.
Yes. It's about making space for those emotions, letting ourselves experience them fully, and recognizing that they can often be a catalyst for growth and healing.
Wow, that's pretty powerful. It's making me think about how I approach not just physical discomfort, but emotional discomfort too. It's almost like shifting from a mindset of got to fix it to a mindset of, okay, let's understand this.
You got it. It's all about cultivating that sense of curiosity and trust in both our bodies and our minds.
I like that. And this whole idea of trusting our body's innate wisdom, it goes way beyond just like individual symptoms, doesn't it? It's about recognizing our body's amazing capacity for self-regulation,
Mm.
and supporting those processes instead of constantly trying to override them.
100%. It's about finding that balance, honoring our body's natural processes, and knowing when medical intervention is truly needed.
So it's really about learning to listen to our bodies, to understand those signals,
Mm.
and to respond in a way that promotes overall well-being, right?
Absolutely. It's about taking back that innate wisdom, recognizing that our bodies often have the answers.
This has been so eye-opening. I feel like I'm starting to see all those everyday aches, pains, and emotional ups and downs in a completely new light.
Mm.
It's less about being afraid of them and more about understanding what purpose they might be serving.
That's great to hear. It really is about embracing a more holistic approach to health and well-being.
Totally. But before we wrap things up, I'm curious, what advice would you give to someone who wants to start cultivating the sense of trust and curiosity in their own body? Where do they even start with something like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. It can feel kind of overwhelming, to be honest, this whole idea of tuning into our body's wisdom. We're just bombarded with so many messages about what we should be doing for our health that it's easy to lose track of, like our own inner compass.
Oh, absolutely. It's all about filtering out that noise and really starting to pay attention to what your body is telling you. And really simple way to start is to cultivate a practice of mindfulness.
Mindfulness, huh?
Yeah.
Like meditation. I've tried that before, but I always feel like my mind is just going a mile a minute. I can't focus. Mindfulness doesn't have to be like formal meditation. It can be as simple as taking a few moments throughout the day to just pause, check in with yourself, notice your breath, feel the sensations in your body, just observe your thoughts and emotions without judgment.
So it's about creating those little pockets of space to
Yeah.
just become aware of what's happening inside.
Exactly. And as you start paying attention, you'll start to notice patterns. You might realize certain foods make you feel sluggish, or a certain activity really energizes you. Maybe you start to recognize the early signs of stress in your body, like a tightness in your chest or your heart racing a bit.
It's like we're learning a new language, the language of our own bodies.
I love that analogy. And just like learning any new language, it takes practice, it takes patience. Some days you'll be more in tune than others, and that's totally okay. The key is to just keep practicing, keep observing, keep listening to what your body's trying to tell you.
So it's about trusting that our bodies are constantly communicating with us, even if those messages are subtle or we're not used to listening to them.
Yes. And as you learn to listen, you start to build that trust and that confidence in your body's innate wisdom. You'll realize that you have this incredible inner healer working for you all the time.
This has been such an incredible conversation. It's really shifted my whole perspective on fevers, on symptoms, on my own body's incredible ability to heal. But before we go, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. If we can learn to trust our body's wisdom when it comes to, physical and emotional well-being, what other areas of our lives might benefit from this same approach? That observation, that curiosity, that trust. It's something to think about as you go about your day. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of fevers and the body's amazing healing power. Until next time, stay curious and stay well.